Welcome, everyone. This week's reading is from week number 25, and it is called The Eternal Now. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. When will I find God? Many devotees have asked this question. Because worldly goals require time, usually for their fulfillment, we imagine time to be a factor on the spiritual path. And so it is, but only because we think it is. God is as much with us now as he will ever be. It is not he who needs to come to us. We need to come to him. And that process of coming is a matter of transforming our self-perception. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 4, Jesus Christ says, Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes, and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. There is a practical teaching in these words, apart from their statement that we have God already, and have to only realize that truth. Jesus is saying, lift up your eyes and look. To hold the eyes uplifted is the best position for meditation. For the seat of superconsciousness lies at a point midway between the eyebrows, in the frontal lobe of the brain, just behind that point. This point is known also as the Christ center. By lifting your eyes and concentrating there, you will find it easier to enter the state of ecstasy. That is why saints in every religion have often been observed during states of deep inner communion, with their eyes uplifted, focused on the inner light, white, as Jesus said, already to harvest. The Bhagavad Gita goes further into this meditative teaching. In the 6th chapter it states, holding the spine firm, the neck and head erect and motionless, let the yogi focus his eyes at the starting place of the nose, or the point between the eyebrows. Let not his gaze roam elsewhere. In meditation, tell yourself, I have him already. I am alive forever in the divine light. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. So, this is a deep topic today about the eternal now. It's a very deep topic, but I'm going to start with this fact, both in the Christian scriptures and in the Bhagavad Gita, and that Swamiji is telling us here that if we want to enter this state, that we need to keep our eyes uplifted. And it's an interesting statement to contemplate, because often in meditation classes, or people who are learning meditation, wherever, however, they are taught to still the mind. And that's a correct teaching. However, it's an interesting way to look at the situation, also of thinking, for us to still our hearts. That if we can really watch the waves of emotion that ripple over the heart, and if we can learn to still that, then we can learn also, those two go together with the mind. You can look at it either way. But then this third teaching here is, let us learn to still our eyes, and let us learn to gently lift our eyes up, and eventually in meditation a state comes where the eyelids are half open and half closed. And it's an interesting thing, because that state is not one we can easily just strive for, to have our eyes half open and half closed. What ends up happening is so much energy develops here at the spiritual eye that it, like a magnet, pulls the eyelids and keeps them in that state half open and half closed. And even the lower eyelids will move up a little bit. In the autobiography of a yogi, I believe Lahiri Mahashaya has some of his words written there in the Bengali script. And he says that he has achieved Sambhavi Mudra, who is able to keep his eyes unwinking. And so it's just another way that always we need some little new thing to try in meditation, even though what we're trying to do is unlearn everything and simply just go back into that state of the eternal now, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But even so, since we've convinced ourselves that time does exist, that we need these little tricks, little hints, little different things to play with or understand as we progress on the spiritual path. What a strange thing indeed, that we have to work so hard to make so much progress, to realize that we never made any progress, and that time never existed, and that there has been this eternal state within us, It always exists, and it's we who have shut that state out by running around on the periphery of our consciousness. Anyway, just to reemphasize one more time, do experiment with this state sometimes in meditation. Do see if you can make your gaze just still. And again, it's difficult in the beginning, but we can keep our eyes shut. But even then, at some point, try to see, are your eyes moving around in meditation? That we know that we're striving for stillness here, but sometimes we're not so still. That in a satsang the other day, I was talking about the Christian statement, "Be still and know that I am God." I believe it's in Psalms. And the interesting correlation is out of the Bhagavad Gita, and that is, without peace, how is bliss possible? And it's a fun thing to correlate the two, because you can take peace as the cessation of all motion or stillness, and you can take bliss as God. And so when you have that perfect stillness, you have God, or you have bliss. Just a very interesting thing between the two scriptures. So we're talking about how to keep the eyes still, and so hopefully that in that state then we can learn how to merge into super consciousness, which is this state where we can see that time doesn't exist. One interesting thing that Paramahansa Yogananda gave us in speaking about the fact that time doesn't exist is to look at all of this stage as a movie. And Paramahansa Yogananda said in his consciousness that he could see that he could roll the movie backwards and see what happened anywhere in the past, or he could roll the movie forward and see what happened anywhere in the future. And the fascinating thing is he was also omnipresent in space, so he could take any point in space. Probably he would take a particular human being as that point, reference point, and then roll the clock forward and see whatever your future would be or whatever your past lives would be. You know, this is such a high topic that, number one, if we think we're really hot stuff in meditation, that lets us know that there's higher states to achieve. And what Christ was talking about here, that when we're able to focus on that inner white light, that we're even beyond that time and space. But I want to drop this conversation for a moment. We'll pick it back up in these higher states again. But I want to drop it down to probably states that we can begin to understand where we're at right now. And you see, the yugas, that they start in Kali Yuga, when everybody has a consciousness just of their physical body and this physical world. And then we go into Dwapara Yuga, where people understand energy, and people begin to banish the delusion of space. Then we go into Treta Yuga, where people banish the delusion of time. And finally we go into Satya Yuga, or this perfect state of super consciousness, where we're beyond all of that. So, you know, human consciousness, this planet, that it goes through stages, that we don't just jump into this state of omnipresence in both space and time. That first we begin to get this glimmering awareness that space is not real. And I think as devotees, probably most of us, that we should begin to concentrate on uplifting our energy, having a higher level of energy, having more energy, having a higher quality of energy, so that we can begin to understand the delusion of space, and that we can begin to understand our true nature. We can begin to understand that the farthest galaxy is as close as our own hand, that we can begin to understand that we are the atom, that we can begin to understand the correlation between the atom and the universe. And already those are high things, but we need that deep understanding, born of understanding in meditation, not so much just from reading, but that understanding in meditation comes when we raise our energy up. I may be speaking to an audience this evening I don't know, who has more age than I have, and might be thinking, yes, but if you were in the body that I was in, that speaking of this high energy thing, that maybe you don't understand my perspective. There's 2 points I want to make on that. Number one is that I was just visiting a 99-year-old, she may be a saint, I don't know, in Brindaban earlier this afternoon. And so this lady, she would get up, she was serving us things, she was reading out of the Srimad Bhagavatam, just on and on. She had a high level of energy, even in her physical body, and she was 99 years old. And I attribute that to the fact that she's been a Brahmacharini her entire incarnation, that she met her guru when she was age 6, and that she's lived a good moral life, and that she's lived an inner life. And that brings me to point number 2 that needs to be made here. That when I speak about having high energy, I don't mean like a 2-year-old that's running around just unbridled here or there, or even some 25-year-olds are out running around doing all kinds of things that might have energy, but they have it because they're 25. But if they continue to behave like that, then that high level of energy won't be there when they're 99, if they make it to 99. So this high level of energy that I'm talking about, it doesn't really matter too much with age. That it matters, is it an energy that we feel in meditation? Is it an energy where we can move that energy with Kriya Yoga up and down the spine, and that we can feel that we have a lot of energy to give to people? Maybe not physically running around in a physical body, but maybe that energy we can still give by reading the scriptures to a group of people, or maybe even silently as we're sending out healing blessings in or after meditation. So back to this topic of the yugas and how these yugas are within us, that we need first to learn how to control our energy. It goes right along with Patanjali again, of the 4th step of pranayama, learning to control our energy, learning to withdraw our energy, learning to not only become aware of energy, but keep our energy uplifted here at the point between the eyebrows. Then we're ready to move on to the higher yugas. And yes, the yugas take a long time to progress on this particular planet, but we can move through these yugas very quickly within our own consciousness if we practice Kriya Yoga. And now we come to the higher topic and the more difficult topic, but let's talk more about it. And that is realizing that we have God right now, that we have everything right now, that who we truly are is one with God. And Paramahansa Yogananda says that God has fooled many saints, that they think, when will he come? When will he come? But we have to affirm that I have you right now, that I've always had you. It's the mind that just comes in and tells us, oh, tomorrow I will find God. But the trick to Treta Yuga, the trick to having a consciousness that can transcend time, is understanding that it's the mind itself that creates time. Let's create a very practical example here. That when we sit to meditate, that if you really want it, and if you have a disciplined mind, you could sit right now for 5 hours and meditate. But you have to have a disciplined mind, and you have to be able to tell yourself, it's all right. Time doesn't really exist. Whether I sit here for 1 hour or 5 hours, it's really the same. And this grows with practice. But if you can convince your mind of that right now, then you're on your way to understanding that you have God already. Another deep point, that as you practice pranayama, as your energy becomes withdrawn and focused here, that time, it really literally starts melting away. That you're in a state of such peace, joy, bliss, light up here, that you're not ticking away. The moments aren't ticking away on the clock. And this is another point that needs to be made. That let's say we go out with our friends to a wonderful dinner or whatever, some family gathering, and it's just a good time, that we're with people, we enjoy their company. When that happens, time seems to go very quickly, doesn't it? That we look at the clock and we say, oh, I have to get going, that I have other duties, but it's been such a fun time. I look forward to seeing you again. And when we're suffering, that time seems to go very slowly. You know, the Christians have misunderstood that hell is eternal, and that if they do something bad, that they're going to be damned to hell for eternal. It's a misunderstanding, because hell seems eternal. That when we're suffering, that it seems like it's going to go on forever, but it's just a seeming. This whole thing is just a dream, and this dream ultimately does just exist in our mind. But we can't just think our way out of it, that we have to realize our way out of it, that we have to have the help of a true guru who will bring us out of it step by step, as I'm talking about, with pranayama, with raising our energy, with understanding how the yugas work, with understanding how our own states of consciousness work. Paramahansa Yogananda, he also made a very fascinating, wonderful statement. And this is, practice Kriya so deeply until breath becomes mind. Again, it's that as we practice Kriya Yoga, first we're going to get these states of understanding that space is a delusion. And then we'll go more deeply and begin to understand that breath literally is mind. That we don't just jump into this state of breathlessness all in one go. That we practice pranayama day by day, night and day, like the chant we had. We should do our sadhana. And when we begin to practice Kriya Yoga morning and night, that we begin then to hit these little states of breathlessness. And then we begin to understand, oh, it's my mind that tells me that I need to take this breath again. But it's all interrelated. Our desires, the mind, our energy, even our physical health, that we do need to take good care of this temple that God has given us. It's a wonderful thing sometimes to think of your physical body as a temple. That we go and we visit those outer temples. I just was in Vrindavan earlier today, and that's a fine thing to do. But at the same time, sometimes remember, the true temple is your own physical body. And that brings us again to this understanding of time and space, that ultimately we do not need to go anywhere. We do not need to go visit a temple in order to find God. We need to sit our own temple down and make it still and quiet and remember where God is. We do not need to go visit other saints in order to achieve this consciousness that I'm talking about this evening. That we simply need to go within our own being and realize that state of consciousness. Realize that all the saints are within us. Do you see that people say, Paramahansa Yogananda, where is he? Where is he? He's not with me anymore. That he's gone, that I'm going to hope that maybe he said that he would reincarnate 200 years from now. That was about when he left his body in 1952. So we can expect him again in, what would that be? 2152. So we could think, okay, somehow I'm going to reincarnate or try to live that long or whatever your secret plan is in order to find Paramahansa Yogananda. But that's the wrong consciousness, my friend. If the true consciousness is that you have him already, that he's right there within you right now. There was a book written by someone, a famous one back in the day, called Be Here Now. First we start with the being here, then we begin to understand, be now. Don't let your mind, again it comes to the mind. The mind goes, oh, over there, tomorrow that I'll be happy, or as soon as I'm done with my work today, then Aramse, I can relax and have the ice cream and watch TV and relax. But all of that, the ice cream, the TV, the after work, it's in your mind. You're putting your happiness, one, outside of yourself in physical space, two, outside of yourself in time, that when I reach that time, I'm going to be happy. I had a neighbor who was a psychiatrist, and I would go and chat with him for spiritual things, that he was an armchair philosopher. He didn't actually do the work of Kriya Yoga, but perhaps next lifetime. He's a wonderful soul anyway, and we can get there by various means. But the end of the game, there are no various means. It's be here now. Anyway, this particular psychiatrist told me that his patients that he had, that he never met one who was depressed and all manic at the same time. Yes, people that are manic depressive, that is a state that exists. But even that, it never happens at the exact same time. They'll be up for a while. I don't know, I'm not a psychiatrist, whether that's 3 hours or 3 days, and then they'll be down. But the point is that when they're down, their mind is in the past, looking in the past. They're drinking alcohol, just saying, oh, it's so terrible, this thing happened, that thing happened. If you had my problems, you'd drink too, on and on, blah, 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 depressed. Then the people that are too manic, they're in the future. Oh my God, what's going to happen tomorrow and 5 days from now? And I have this to do and that to do, and how can I make this happen? And when he was telling me about both of these states, somehow it just made me realize, be here now. Don't let my mind run into the future. Don't let my mind run into the past. And people can take this teaching too far. Of course, that if you have some big event, you're going to have to sit down and plan it in the future. But here's an interesting esoteric view on that. If the future already exists, that maybe when you sit down to plan your big event, that really all you're doing is tuning into God's will. And if you're doing it sensitively, that you can ask God, God, how many people should we plan to come to this event? God, what type of food should we have? God, what should the main speaker talk about, or whatever? And then it's an interesting thing to think about, because if it happens exactly the way you plan, one perspective would be to say, I'm such a good organizer. Look at my ego that I planned this thing ABC and it went ABC. How smooth, what a wonderful organizer I am. The other way to look at it is how well that I was able to tune into God's will, which already existed. And perhaps you're on your way to becoming a rishi who can look into the future that already exists if you get deeply in tune enough with God. So the point of all of this is that we need to come back within ourselves, and that we need to learn how to make everything still. That if we want to learn how to look through time, that we need to learn how to still our mind in meditation and not let the mind wander hither, thither. It's definitely difficult because the mind certainly wants to go outside itself, but at some point we just look at the mind as a great liar. And this is another important point, that we think we need this mind that we're used to dealing with, that chops things up and analyzes and says, how will I be happy? I'll be happy when I do this. But we begin to realize that mind, he's a liar. And that if we can just place that mind over here, it sounds like, well, if I have no mind, how am I going to function? But when we go deep inside into a state of pure consciousness, that in that state of pure consciousness, we're actually more aware. We actually have a deeper understanding, that we're connected with all of life. And so don't be afraid of that state of consciousness. Don't be afraid to try to go into meditation and just drop all of our past troubles and drop all of our future planning. We do it every night when we go to bed, and if you can't fall asleep, it means that you're either in one of those states, too much or the other, of thinking too much about the past or thinking too much about the future. That psychiatrist, he deals with the people who have these states like, they're blown way out of control. But all of us have it to a little bit if we have any worry whatsoever, that if we're worried about the past or the future. So meditation helps us learn how to get rid of all worries. And why not live in that state? That we can live in that state. And that state, again, is living in the now, is just understanding that God will take care of it. And again, I do understand that, yes, we do have to do some planning, but once we start touching into this superconscious state, that we can do that planning even with God, even as we have to do it. Anyway, I already revisited that topic. Let me check my notes in this last 5 minutes and see which things that I want to talk about here. I pretty much already talked about all of them. I want to bring up one other thing, and then I'll go to a different thing here. And that is that we can learn by so many different routes. That we can learn by meditation, we can learn by reading Swamiji's books, but also I just want to encourage everyone again to learn by listening to Swamiji's music. And there's a song that he has, and the words on it are that men hunger for freedom, but don't see their dungeon, is only the thought that they're bound. I'm going to read that again. Let's reiterate that. Men hunger for freedom, but don't see their dungeon, is only the thought that they're bound. So it's we ourselves who have put ourselves into our own prison. This whole deal around us that we feel is so real, it's a dream. And the bars in that dream, actually let me read the next lines to this song. Desires are their shackles, the hope that tomorrow, desires are their shackles, the hope that tomorrow, the doorway to joy will be found. So This, again, it's the teaching that we teach every day, just in a different way. That it's our own desires that are our shackles. And those desires, they bind the mind. Those desires are the thing that make the mind go outside of itself. And when getting rid of those desires obviously is not easy. But with Kriya Yoga, we can get rid of those desires. And then we can begin to see this as a dream. Again, I want to reemphasize, we need to awake from this dream slowly. That don't try to force your mind to understand that this is a dream. You'll drive yourself crazy. There's no need for that. That we're going to slowly wake up from this. I'm going to find something to read also right now to end with from Swamiji's book. This is called The Promise of Immortality. And Swamiji wrote a lot about this. I don't have time to go over it all today. Let's see which... Here we go. I'm just going to read a few interesting statements here. Number one is, the illusion of space and time is produced by movements of thought in divine consciousness. It is by movement or vibration that cosmic creation is manifested. Without movement, absolute consciousness alone would remain. Movement actually produces the space within which it vibrates. It's a fascinating thing to contemplate. That it's just that thought vibrates. I don't have time to go into the whole layers of creation and how it manifests, but if we can just keep that thought from vibrating, that then space itself, boom, it disappears. The dream itself disappears. A few more things. We have a few more minutes to read here. If these truths, this is a good thing to end on. If these truths seem abstract, they gain practical usefulness when we realize that our need in seeking God is to rise above the consciousness of time and space. There is no necessity for us to travel here or there, to visit this holy saint or that sacred shrine in order to realize God. If time is required to know Him, it is only because we live under the hypnosis of time. If we think it important to visit some saint, it is because we don't see that the saint, if he is indeed a master, is consciously with us even now. So let's end on that point. Let's remember that all of the great masters are with us even right now. And let's remember that the reason those masters have come to us and made themselves known is to help us too become a master. So in daily meditation, we too slowly are going to grow into this consciousness until we realize that all of us, since forever, always have been and always will be one. Joy to you.